Hello and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program and episode 2 of our RP-1 series, where we play realism, overhaul, realistic progression, and real solar system. In the last episode, we got our agency up and running and built a couple sounding rockets to break the Kármán line and complete the first couple contracts. And in this episode, we're just going to be focusing on the next level of contract, the downrange 3,000 kilometers contract. And this is actually how I'm going to be doing the episodes going forward. I'm going to focus about one contract at a time, and we're going to work on what it took to get there. So let's go ahead and load up our file. And here we are back at the KSC. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to head into the administration building, and we are going to set ourselves an administrator. This building is a lot more important in RP-1 than it was in stock, because there's a lot more options to choose that will affect your gameplay in certain ways. So as you see here, each administrator comes with 2 positives and 1 negative trait to each of them. A lot of it is a hit in reputation or a hit in funds, and so we're just kind of looking through here to see which leader we want to take, because some of the things we don't necessarily need, like we don't need advanced research towards X-planes, because we're not going to be doing X-planes anytime soon. And we're going to take I apologize if I butcher this, but Satish Dhawan, because he gives an increase in science from transmissions. We do have a negative percentage off of our yearly funds, but it's a small enough percentage that it's not too much of a worry. So here we are in the mission control, looking at the different contracts, and it's going to be this one that we're going to work on today. We need to get a rocket 3,000 kilometers downrange. We have to control it for 50 seconds, which should be very easy because our engines burn for a little bit longer than that. So it's just a matter of getting the distance right. Previously we got height, and height is easy because you just have to go straight up. But when it comes to going downrange, the path you take, the trajectory your rocket goes on, makes a huge difference. So now we're going to cut ahead in our footage. I spent the better part of 2.5 to 3 hours testing out a rocket design that did not work and was just ever so slightly almost good enough to work, that I kept trying and banging my head. But here I'm just rebuilding it, and this is the design that eventually we stick with. And the difference is that instead of going for the procedural tanks, I went here for these modular tanks instead. Now the modular tanks at high pressure steel and regular steel are actually heavier than the procedural tanks, but at the aluminum stage they're actually lighter, and so that extra bit of lightness will pay off in the end. So now I'm trying to work out the, it's not exactly a fairing because it is actually part of the tank, but how the tank is going to sit to cover the engine. And ultimately this is the way that you're going to want to do it. You're going to want to put the tank at the bottom and lift it up like that. There we go. This sits nicely. Earlier you saw me bring the early photo camera and put that on top, and that was just as a way to check my diameter to see if that will be the same diameter I will be using when I eventually send that camera downrange, and thankfully it was. So this is a little bit future-proofed because we're going to be able to use it in future missions. Hopefully. That's the idea. But for now, we're going to bring the nose cone to be 300 millimeters. And we're extending out the tank to get the burn time to match with our engines. I believe 115 is its rated. So that's going to put us at about 119, 120 is where we want to be. And now we got to make sure that we can control the appropriate amount of mass. We want to make sure that we have enough electric charge to maintain control for that amount of distance. And we're going to go ahead and use another tank and put that in the nose cone to keep our avionics just very simple. And we're going to go ahead and name this the LV2, and that stands for the Launch Vehicle 2. And this is our secondary design because, as I mentioned before, I spent several hours working on a design that did not work. And since I rebuilt it from the ground up, I decided to just include this footage instead of wasting your time with that, which would have easily doubled the size of the episode. So here we are making the Aerobee, but we're also using the conventional tanks, or the modular tanks as well, because that will save on weight. And we're deciding to go with this procedural decoupler so we can put a solid rocket booster between those two. So now we're putting the avionics back on, separated by a decoupler, of course. And we turn it into a cone to give aerodynamics. We adjust the communication. We only need 20 dBms. We're going to go ahead and put in our science experiments in there. And we're going to adjust out the size of the tank so we can get the appropriate burn time. And of course, check our staging. Always important. And put a launch clamp on the bottom. And there we go. Now we bring out our Aerobee. So I decided to make it a little bit wider to save on height. Just paint the fins a little bit before we copy them. Since we have the options to paint our parts, it's we're gonna try to take a moment to take advantage of that option. Now we're just going to adjust it to fit the stage. They don't need to be as big. And again, we're trying to get the center of lift to be very close while still being beneath the center of mass. Because every little bit of weight that you shave off those wings saves costs as well. Now we're going to put some spin motors on there, and that is going to spin stabilize us. We're going to get a little bit of spin stabilization from the angle of our wings, but we want to make sure that that very last stage has as much spin as it can possibly get. We also upgrade the strength multiplier of the wings to give it some more sturdiness as it spins. Once again, we check and rearrange our staging. And it's time to simulate. So that was a pretty successful simulation, but we have some room for improvements. Firstly, we're going to angle those wings for a better spin stabilization. We're also going to give it a little bit more control because we ended up losing control at the very beginning, and it took a second before the mass was the right size. Again, another test flight, learned some things. One of those things was this thing likes to burn up upon re-entry. And so what we're going to do here is not always advised, it's not always what's necessary, but this is going to end up helping us. And so we are going to put a clamshell fairing over our avionics. The clamshell fairing will keep it from overheating as we come back through the atmosphere. Most people that I talked to online when I was working through this problem explained that I didn't need a fairing and that the fairing was unnecessary, it was overkill, it was extra weight, it was all this stuff. But it was what managed to get this contract to be successfully completed, and so I am going to stand by the addition of this fairing. So now that it isn't a fairing, it doesn't need to be aerodynamic, so we're going to go ahead and adjust the size of our avionics. And adjust the size of our fairing. So another simulation. And once again back into the VAB. So we're adjusting the amount of control that it has on its major thing. And now we're going to come right back out to the KSC grounds. And we're going to go once again back into the administration building because we have some more programs that we can unlock now. So now that we've accepted the downrange contract, we have these 3 administration leaders that we can take. And these are companies, and like the administration leaders before, they have some positives and some negatives to them. And so we can utilize these to kind of focus on certain things. So if one company wants to specifically focus on hydrogen and oxygen engines, and that's kind of what we're wanting to move forward towards, we can do that. Whereas another company may be working on crude capsules, and it's like, well, we're not there yet. We don't need to activate a company that's working on crude capsules when we're still doing uncrewed vessels. So and those administration leaders can be replaced after a certain amount of time. So now we're going to hire a bunch of people. We're going to start getting into the aggressive spending phase where we're hiring more researchers and more engineers to work on our launch pads, launch complexes. So we're going to go once again back into the VAB. We're going to take a look at our stuff, and we're going to create a launch complex that can handle this. aircraft. We're going to try to future-proof it a little bit, just in case we need to give it a little bit more height. And we're going to kind of straddle the line between minimum and maximum tonnage here. Because it's not ideal to have to adjust your launch complex with each launch, but rather if you can just focus on reusing your launch vehicles. Alright, so there we go. I'm stocking it up with engineers, and let's go ahead and get ready to put this in. Gonna paint it a little bit. Make our rockets look nice. I'm gonna have this black and white checker because it's a nice and easy way of knowing when your rocket is spinning. And there we go. We have the LV2 Aerobee 3. Let me put the name tag right on there on the side. Excuse me, the Aerobee 2, not the Aerobee 3. There we go, got our name tags lined up. Now it's going to get time to tool it. And we're going to spend some funds to make this much easier, much simpler, much cheaper to produce. We're going to unlock all of our parts. Sadly, because I changed the engine and I changed the fuel type, we're going to need to readjust our launch complex once more. And because the XASR has a different fuel type, different fuel combination, and different burn time, we're going to have to adjust this Aerobee to fit. So let's once again tool it. It's not a smart idea to tool it multiple times, but that's what we get for being impatient. And now we have to readjust the launch complex once again. So launch complex has been created. Let's go ahead and put one or two of these in the queue. And so now I'm just thinking about how having two of them might not be worthwhile, because we'll probably end up unlocking more tech before the second one is completed. So as I'm thinking about that, I'm time warping to complete some of the progress on the first one, and then I decide to scrap the second one. Because if this launch is successful, which according to the simulations it was, so if it goes off correctly, we're going to utilize this rocket and try to complete it, another one with it. But at that point we're going to be redesigning parts of it, so we don't need both in the queue. So time warping to its completion. And then we are going to time warp to the rollout. Here we are on the 5th of July, 1955. Not the most time efficient. Most RP-1 players that you see on YouTube will definitely be much more accomplished by this. Some of them are even orbiting by 1955, but our program is going slow and steady. So a successful release and a successful first ignition of our A9. We went ahead and skipped the A4 and just went straight to the upgraded version of this. This is once again flying via Mike Jed's autopilot. It's going to be handling our staging as well as our gravity turns. Let's go ahead and bring up the engine information here and the SRB engine information here. And then of course the Aerobee information right here. And we like to have this here because we like to look at the stats and figures on it. I like to see that the information, the intel about the part is increasing. I like to see our ignition chances and our failure chances and how close we are to that, mean times between failures. All of this is learning material. So it's good to keep an eye on it. The other window we have up at the top is the contracts, of course. And this will help us keep an eye on all of our parameters. Once again, we have to have a craft that maintains control for the first 50 seconds of flight. And that will be done by the time the lower booster, the LV2, is staged off. Then it's a matter of going 140 kilometers up to break the line and reach space. That should be no problem. In fact, we'll probably pass that by a large chunk. But lastly, the hard part, the bulk of the contract, is to go downrange 3,000 kilometers. Thankfully, we don't need to recover it. So this is on a one-way mission. So now we're just going to watch as the craft ascends. We're keeping an eye on our Delta V stats to see how much Delta V we have left in the lower stage and when it's going to stage. We also are looking at our engine readouts. We're just kind of looking at all sorts of stuff. Our apoapsis, time to apoapsis. Just going to cut ahead a little bit, closer to engine cutoff. Now the craft has decided to stop its spin stabilization, so it's a good thing that we have our spin motors on there. And just like that, we stage, the spin motors fire, giving us a nice little rotation. Our SRB fires pushing us forward, keeping our ullage good, and then our Aerobee takes off without a hitch. So now this is going to burn for a while, and this is going to increase our apoapsis considerably, but that's also going to give us the height we need to go the distance we need as well. But the angle of approach coming back in is going to be a lot, so this heat shield, this makeshift heat shield, as you will, you'll see makes this mission work out in the end. So we're just going to time warp up, watch our science gain, transmit some more of it, which is going to be good because we need to keep the science flowing. And we're coming down. We're coming down fast. The heat shield isn't perfect. It's not going to carry us all the way to victory. We'll eventually fail. And so will our avionics. And that was a failure of a mission because we did not complete our downrange goal. However, that was more than a simulation. Everything went according to plan. No engines failed, no nothing. There was no Kraken attack. That was not designed to work well enough. So we're going to have to take another stab at that, and therefore we are going to accept that loss. However, we gained quite a bit of science out of that, and so we're going to be able to put that to use almost immediately. So first off, I want to grab that early rocketry. I want to get a better engine. Better engines are going to be the whole point, and we're also going to grab the science node because that is going to give us the biological experiment, which is going to be necessary for a future contract, and we might as well start getting that into the works now. So yeah, so I've got a lot of science to work on now. We're gonna go ahead and get rid of that X-planes. I had high hopes of working on X-planes, but I feel like every attempt, I've made some off-camera attempts at building airplanes, and I seem to struggle getting off the runway. So I think I'm going to put a pin in that and focus on rockets only. So now we're going to head back into the VAB and see if we can't tinker this into a successful launch. So first we're going to upgrade our avionics, which will lighten the load. And now that we have another lighter tank, we're going to go ahead and adjust the fuel mixture and the size to accommodate that as well. We're going to go ahead and leave, and we time warped ahead until the research node was developed that allowed us to unlock the AJ1027, and the final engine configuration for the Araby. This one burns for the longest amount of time and is the most efficient, so if this can't get us 3,000 kilometers downrange, then we're going to be having a serious problem. But since it's new fuel and new heights, we are going to have to redesign the launch complex once again, which is just more funds and more time wasted, but you know, we're learning as we go along, and you know, I hope you're learning as well. If you're playing RP-1 alongside this, if you're playing it for the first time, you know, I strongly feel that Let's Plays teach you just as much, if not more, about the game or the mod than a straight up tutorial may. Because a tutorial will teach you how to do it. It'll say, oh, step 1, grab this tank, you know, stretch it out to this diameter, stretch it out to this length. Now, you know, next grab this engine, put it on there, tune it, you know, set for this. And sure, you'll learn how to make a rocket that goes, and it will complete the contract, but you also learn by seeing me, you know, not have the right engine and not have the, you know, appropriate thrust to weight ratio and stuff, and you learn from other people's mistakes as much as you learn from their successes, and it's a good feeling. So now we are ready. We've adjusted our launch pad to accommodate this, we're just going to go ahead and at the last moment throw on this biological experiment. And we're going to throw on the mass spectrometer because we time warped long enough to unlock those science nodes. Alright, so let's send this rocket as far as we can downrange. We're going to aim our camera at the top and kind of wiggle our way into the fairing to grab the screen and make sure that we have our science running on all of our experiments. There we go. And with that, we keep an eye on our engine. We engage our autopilot. And it's time for launch. And with that, we have successfully completed our downrange contract. The rest is just left up to residual science, and this can burn up in the atmosphere with no problem. Except for, you know, the little creature inside that experiment. But anyways, this is the successful completion of this contract, and it's going to be the successful completion of this episode. I want to thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more RP-1. If you are, please consider giving me a like, drop me a comment, let me know your thoughts, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.